You are now tuned in to Westworld FM, a podcast about HBO's Westworld. My name is Alex.
And my name is Nick.
Today we will be discussing Season 3, Episode 2 of the show titled The Winter Line. We will not be discussing the next time on teaser at the end of the episode, but we will be spoiling everything through Season 3, Episode 2 of the series, so please pause and go catch up if you're not current on the show. You can find more episodes of our podcast at westworld.fm. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can send feedback to westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. If you enjoy this show or any other show on the Midwest Podcast Network, please consider heading over to patreon.com/MidwestPodNet and pledge as little as $1 a month to making our network even better. Special thanks to Jason K. and Gojo, who have pledged at the level of $10 per month. There's also a shorter link. It's mpn.bz/Patreon if you like typing less letters like I do. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
That's good.
I am loving the quarantine lifestyle.
Is there sarcasm in there, or is it?
Yeah, like 15% sarcasm.
I know. I think I feel the same way.
Like it sucks for all the obvious like survival reasons that it sucks, yeah. But like in a way, it's kind of great. Mm-hmm. I have a very little baby daughter at home, as you know, and this has actually afforded me the opportunity to spend a lot more time with her. Absolutely, which is kind of amazing. Yeah, and I'm enjoying it. That's at good. Least that aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it's nice to be able to spend time with people. I'm sure it only gets harder to be at work and away from the people that you love when you have like a young baby with you. So, yeah,
it's honestly. It's a drag, and I was getting used to it. Like we were kind of getting into a routine where we were like, okay, this is just when I will see her and when I won't. But it's a bummer too, because by the end of the day, they're kind of toast. Yeah. And I was getting home, 5:30, sometimes even 6, and then she goes to bed like an hour later, and it's just like super depressing some days. So this is kind of wonderful. Yeah. And that's literally the only upside.
Yeah. Well, it's a good upside to have at least.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty amazing.
All right. Well, I do have one little thing for the corrections department. Not so much a correction, but I did come to learn after listening to other podcasts and things. Last week, I glossed over the fact that there was a missing shareholder at the Delos board meeting. And for some reason, I was somewhat oblivious as to who exactly it was when they were referring to the fact that it was probably William, the man in black himself. So I did not connect those dots whatsoever, but other people that are smarter than me did. And
you mean the point where they say it depends on what he says, or something to that effect?
They say it depends on what he says, and then Charlotte Hale or whoever is in her body is like, he's left a machine proxy in his place, and there's like a little computer tablet thing that's like basically the bit and byte from Tron that says yes, and that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other thing that I didn't catch about that is, like, of course the machine proxy agrees with her because she and Dolores can hack and modify whatever they want in the technological world, right? So, as we saw with the beginning of last week's episode. So, there was quite a bit I didn't catch in that little span of time there. But, I wanted to get that on the record for those of you who may not listen to other podcasts and things about Westworld. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For some reason, I know this is wrong, but my initial instinct was that it was Ford. But I was like, I know that's not right. It's been too long.
Yeah. Well, and I also, for some reason, was of the mind of like, I was really curious if the other co-founder, if Serac was also like in the shit at Delos as well, if he was on the board, but I don't know why my mind went there. So, but I'm glad to have an answer for that, and that it wasn't really a mystery, even though I was thinking it was.
Right. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that this season. We're going to think there's mysteries where there aren't, and we're not going to realize there are mysteries in certain places.
Yeah, thankfully there's a lot of eyes on it from Reddit and other podcasters and all kinds of stuff. So I will be this week. I have started at least paying attention to a few other things. I'm trying to make sure that I don't listen to any other podcasts before we record ours, because I don't want to like unknowingly steal other people's ideas and things like that. So, all right, I think we can get on with the recap.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
All right. We open up with Maeve quickly finding Hector in War World with her. Hector, man, it's really hard to say War World. I'm finding out as I say these words that I type.
War World.
Hector sneaks them out of town on the promise of delivering secrets to the Allies, and Maeve doesn't completely realize that something's not quite right with Hector. As they escape, Maeve tries to use her reprogramming powers, but they do not work on the German officers. They still manage to get away to a plane that Maeve thinks Hector wants to use to get out of the parks, but Hector refers to Maeve as Isabella, tipping her off to the fact that Hector is not woke anymore. They get ambushed by German officers, and Maeve ends up shooting herself to end back up at the body shop. What'd you think of our first glimpses of War World?
I really, really liked it.
Yeah.
In my notes, I think I had War World is the new best world. I really, really loved it. I loved. They definitely were making fun of dramas, I feel like, of that era and that like subject matter. And there was one particular moment that really killed me, and it was when they were sneaking around the perimeter of the little square with like the Italian soldiers, and that when the way he was kind of guiding her and like holding her around the hips as they were running, I was like snorting and laughing, because I was like, this is exactly like I could see like Cary Grant and Grace Kelly doing this exact thing. Like it just was perfect.
Yeah.
The whole spy kind of thriller vibe that they were going for was really cool, and it just kept ratcheting up and up in terms of the kind of absurdity of it, like the car when he uncovers the car, and it was this very over the top presentation that was a perfect kind of skewering of movies like that. So I think they're having fun with kind of poking fun at genres at this point, or paying homage, but in like the right trappings.
Yeah, there was part of me that for a moment in my rewatch, I got kind of pulled out of it, because I was thinking about the fact that like, God, what's Hector's actor's name?
Rodrigo Santoro?
Yes, Rodrigo Santoro is playing this part of a character who doesn't know that he's not real, that is also playing the part of the fact that he's like a spy in the World War II. There's so many levels deep of these performances that these people are doing that it's just kind of mind-blowing to kind of be like, how do you assemble yourself into that space, you know? Like, obviously, maybe they're not thinking about it as much, and he's just like, oh, I'm being this archetype that's in the spy movie, in you know, wartime spy kind of thing that's going on. But at least there's part of me that looks at it and is like, man, they really like figure out such a brilliant way to situate themselves as these characters that are like kind of playing three different characters at once, you know?
Oh yeah. It's incredible stuff. And it's hilarious how well he does it. Mm-hmm. Like he totally carries that sort of exotic leading man vibe in a really convincing way. Yeah,
and that's kind of like the one of the really fun things that I think about it now. We've got like these two Rodrigo Santoro performances in Hector Escatan and whatever they call this guy, Ettore, something like that.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it was like very offhand remark at one point in this first scene, and that's about it. But between those two, and then also I think Hiroyuki Sanada was kind of his stand-in in Shogun World last season, and so kind of comparing those three performances, like you said, they're in three completely different genres of movie, but yet they all were played by Gregory Peck or somebody like that, you know, like they all could have been played by that actor of that time, you know. So it's interesting to see them play with those types of things.
Yeah, it was a really cool sequence. I loved the way it was shot too.
Yeah, there was the one thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was some of the effects work in this whole episode. But I don't know if you noticed that, like, muzzle flashes and smoke from guns and things like that wasn't looking particularly great.
Yeah, during the whole freezing, overloading, overtaxing the system sequence, it was pretty apparent, but the effect was used well, so I definitely forgave it.
Yeah, that was, like, at least at that point, I'm kind of like, okay, the simulation is, like, kind of falling apart, and so maybe I can forgive some of that, but, like, even in this first escape sequence when they're getting shot at and you see puffs of smoke and things like that coming out of the guns, I'm just like, none of this looks real. Like, it was kind of strange to me, and I don't know if it's like I'm watching on a 4K TV and I don't know what they've uploaded to HBO now and stuff like, I don't know, but it looked like it was probably going to get a couple more passes by the time it makes it to Blu-ray.
Yeah, so, I could see that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's no way it was by design, but it'd be kind of funny if they were like, oh, movies of this era looked like this, so this is kind of how it's going to look. Yeah,
that would be funny. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it could have just been budget constraints or something like that, or maybe I think I'm smart, but I'm not. I don't know. But could be anything. But yeah.
I did love I loved Maeve's line of it's as empty as the safe you used to chase.
Yes.
The wonderful line.
Yeah, that kind of representation, like the symbolism of all of it, of the idea that, like, you know, Lee Sizemore has copy and pasted his entire story from 3 different worlds and, like, made little tweaks here and there to make it work. Seeing all of that kind of be even reiterated once again in Warworld, but not necessarily over the top and not to the point where, like, it's been long enough since we were in Shogun World that it's not like, oh, they're doing this again. It feels very interesting to have kind of Maeve is right there with us. She's seen it 3 times, you know? So it's a very interesting kind of juxtaposition between those 3 storylines.
I wondered to myself as I was watching it, so if Warworld were... I think it's safe to say that Warworld is not an actual park. It's simply something that was created for Maeve to inhabit. I don't know that it's actually a park. It's hard to say, but either way, that's a conversation we can have later.
Yeah.
I was just thinking to myself, like, man, when it first started, I was like, what is the appeal here? Like, why would a real person want to come into Warworld? And, like, what would they get out of it? And you made the remark and sort of the joke last week that it's to either kill Nazis or to be a Nazi. Yeah. And I kind of thought, yeah, that's probably it. But I also, at first I was like, I don't get it. And then once she and Hector were kind of in this flight mode and it was like, their kind of chemistry and their romance was swirling through the air. I was like, oh, this is it. It's for, like, a guy to rescue a beautiful, you know, woman who's trapped in this horrible situation, or vice versa for a woman to be rescued by Rodrigo Santoro. And I was like, okay, so, like, romance seems to be kind of the linchpin, at least from the perspective we're given in this episode. But you know, violence certainly, you know, you'd have a different kind of violence than you would in Westworld. That would attract a whole other type of person, I think.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because the pace in Westworld is slow, right? Like, you get off the train and it can hit the gas quickly depending on what sort of scripted events you were witnessing. But, like, in Warworld, I gotta feel like you're always on edge. Like, there would be no downtime. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and like, when they get on the plane, do they let the guests fly the plane? Like, right. You know, it's probably, you know, I'm sure the host is always ready to be like, I'll take control, but you can be my co-pilot, or whatever they'd say. But, like, it's just kind of like when the stakes get that big, you're kind of like, how the hell could they really, like, that's why we spent maybe an episode.
How can you control it?
Yeah. So
yeah, I don't think it's actually a real park. I don't think that that it existed, and maybe it did.
The only thing that makes me think it does is the outside of the show stuff that they do on the Delos Destinations website, because Warworld is listed on there, and the Raj is listed on there, and Shogun World is listed on there.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, Medieval World is like still like a scrambled signal on the website, the way that they show it, and then the fifth park, because the Raj is number 6, I think it's the newest, but the fifth park is still unknown at this point in time.
Interesting.
So I think it is real, but yeah, who knows? I mean, it could be, because this is all a simulation too. Maybe this is just the, Disney World. They've made the ride in VR, and now we got to figure out how we're going to actually implement it. Who knows at this point, right?
Yeah.
But no, it certainly gives a lot to think about, the fact that we get to see this new park with a totally different, as you said, like a different scale of action or pace of action. It's certainly something to think about. But yeah, any other thoughts on the opening?
No, I liked it. It was cool. I hope War World is an actual park and we get to see it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it would be incredible if like the finale of the show or something, this is just like crazy battle through all the parts of all the different parks or something like that.
It's Thor: The Dark World, but on Westworld.
Yeah, and done well.
Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah, that's world number 5 is
done well. That was the one sequence of that movie that was actually pretty awesome.
That's true. That is very true.
However, it came out like 2013. I haven't seen it since, so yeah. I could watch it today and be like, ooh.
No, I think I watched it not that long ago, before Endgame, and
it still worked.
That sequence still works. The rest of the movie's also still bad. But
yeah, that's a pity.
What are you gonna do? All right, next up, we see another divergence on what I believe is the Rehoboam interface. It's in the South China Sea. Bernard arrives at Westworld by water, and he traipses through the park and sees that Escalante has been burnt to a crisp. Kind of weird that he can just pull up on a boat and walk in.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking, excuse me, during that sequence, I was like, this reminds me a lot of Jurassic Park. Like, this feels like the premise of a Jurassic Park movie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Jurassic Park 3, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, just the idea that you could just be like, oh, we're going back to the island.
Yes.
Local fishermen, take me there. You know exactly where it is.
It's like weird Michael Crichton DNA is still stuck in there somewhere.
Yeah, you know what? I guess that's the common factor.
Yeah. The other thing, people on the internet are saying that, like, oh, they made remarks about the QA team being pretty bare bones at this point. That's why they have the no-face drones in the Mesa kind of scoping out security. But I don't know. It still seems very weird to me that there's not like a huge fucking fence or something out in the middle of the sea that they've put up.
Yeah, seriously. That if you know where the island is, you could just come to Westworld.
Yeah. Yeah. Just makes me think of all the times where people are like, what if they step outside and it's Mars? It's like, no.
I know. Well, this is a point where, well, I shouldn't say it was during this point, but I thought of this sequence later in the episode when I began to wonder if Bernard was in a simulation himself. Because it's all very easy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And this sort of theory bubbling around in my head is reinforced by Stubbs and everything Stubbs.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that when we spend 20 minutes just talking about Stubbs.
Well, yeah. Stubbs is very Sizemore in this episode, right?
Yes.
It's so convenient for what's going on. That's great. I didn't even think of that at all. That's awesome.
Well, and Stubbs was always a really fun, kind of slightly bro-y character, but in this episode, he's like the ultimate wingman. He's like,
yeah,
it's like almost comical and over the top how like last action hero-y he is.
For sure. Yeah.
Seems a little convenient and a very perfect foil for a guy like Bernard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Either way, I'm going to enjoy the shit out of it. So
for sure. I'm just glad that he's back. That we get to see more of him.
Me too. And he's just extra Stubbs now.
Yes.
He's really sardonic and it's beautiful.
Suicidal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he just wants to.
I just want to be done with this.
I'm going to go retire myself. Just constantly.
All right. Well, more on Stubbs in a minute.
Oh, yes.
The charred remains of Escalante I thought was pretty interesting because the set of that city burned in the California fires last year, or 2 years ago. I can't remember exactly. I think it was last year. But kind of interesting that they incorporated that a little bit just to kind of show it in ruin. Like the shots that you see of the church, if you just Google Westworld set burning or something like that, you can see the picture. Like the pictures that they take are of the exact same thing. It's not. They didn't touch it at all. They just put Jeffrey right there, and
I hadn't even thought about that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, like it was just it seemed like a very like effortless use of it, and kind of like makes me wonder if they had to rewrite anything, or if they kind of paid attention to that, and it, they were like, oh, we can use that, or how they kind of naturally got to that decision to show it that way. But very interesting and kind of a cool way to use like a sad turn of events. Like, because I remember kind of being like, oh man, that sucks that set's burning. Like, hope they didn't need it for season 3, but it worked out okay, clearly. So, all right. Next up, Maeve awakens in the body shop and tries to get help from former allies Felix and Sylvester, but the latter calls security on her. Just as Maeve is about to lobotomize herself to not deal with life as a host, Lee Sizemore reappears to cover for her in front of the security team. Maeve can't believe that Lee is alive, but they manage to miss his heart with the 6 shots that hit him, and Maeve wonders why he put her in Warworld, and he explains to her that it's the closest to the Forge, and she might still be able to spend some time with her daughter. Fantastic to see Simon Quarterman back as Lee Sizemore. I was not really thinking it would happen. I thought he was gone and dead, and it turns out that he is, but it was a very clever way to bring him back into the fold.
Yeah, it was really cool. I loved it. It was clever, and it was kind of sweet, kind of endearing, kind of sad. Like it was very complex in terms of, I mean, just watching the simulated Sizemore come to terms with what he was amazing.
Well, and the fact that like it still kind of illustrates the difference between Dolores and Maeve in the sense that like, there's no part of me that would think that Dolores would have enough of a connection with the person like that to kind of be able to look at them and be like, oh, you're not acting right, or you're different, or this isn't who you were. Like, so it just kind of, fleshes out the Maeve character a little bit more. And they had like his exit last season was great. It was like a very heroic moment of him being like, you got to go get your daughter and I'm going to save the day here. And to give him that moment when he's been writing it for somebody else so many times was like a really beautiful and felt somewhat unearned for who he was as a person in the show.
Right.
So I really enjoyed seeing him back, even if it was just like a fleeting moment, but more on that.
Were you suspicious at all right off the top?
I was not in this scene. No, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was like, oh shit, he's back. And I think eventually I started getting there, but it was kind of as the show starts giving you more clues, kind of right before Maeve starts figuring it out. But
right.
What about you? Did you see it coming?
No, I didn't, which is funny because the opening sequence, I saw it coming really early. I was like, oh, she's not really, this isn't real. And like that one, I smelled it very early on, but with Sizemore, no, I didn't put it together.
Yeah.
I was until later, probably right around the same time Maeve started to. As soon as he started confessing his love for her, I was like, nope.
Yeah, well, I got it like milliseconds before you, because as soon as he was like, it's like, the weird thing is that Lee has no reason to know what went on in the Forge, right? Even literally nobody outside of the Forge besides, like, it's just Bernard and Dolores that should be aware of what happened in that room.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody could have communicated to him what happened there, other than what they could have inferred by like what the purpose of the Forge was in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So like for him to kind of be like, oh, it's what you did here to get your daughter in the Valley Beyond, like as soon as he started asking very pointed questions about it and being like, well, why wouldn't you have done that and things like that, I was like, this is getting fishy. This isn't right. Somebody's trying to learn something here. But yeah. So, I liked their repartee, of course. There were some that when he talks about how they missed his heart, and she's like, cunning of you to make so compact a target.
Right.
Very, very good. And his line about the most nuanced character arc is that of the goddamn Panzer tank. Very, very good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that simulated Sizemore may not have actually been Sizemore, but it was Sizemore.
Yeah, they nailed him pretty well in most respects.
Yeah.
It was when they tried to repurpose him to use him for something that they failed.
But, yeah.
All right. Bernard returns to the replica of Ford's family cottage to poke around in the lab underneath. He finds the busted tablet and walks back into a closet full of abandoned Bernards to find Ashley Stubbs with a gunshot wound. Stubbs is still alive and definitely a host. His final mission was to get Bernard out of the park, so when he completed that mission, he tried to shoot his explosive vertebrae. Bernard replaces Stubbs' C6 vertebrae with one of the abandoned Bernards, allowing him to leave the park if necessary. With Bernard back, his job is not done. Bernard wants to stop Dolores, and to do that, he needs Maeve, and Stubbs is going to take him to her. Did you happen to watch the behind the scenes after the episode?
No, I didn't.
So they actually mentioned in there that this time all of the glitching that was being done was all Luke Hemsworth. So they didn't use a computer necessarily to help him out. I'm sure there was some audio kind of tricks that they did to replicate the sounds that he was making very precisely.
Oh. Wow.
But it was apparently all him. They didn't digitally enhance him at all like they did Delos in the last season as he was glitching and things like that. So
holy shit.
Yeah. So he did a very good job. Even watching it the second time, I was like, God, that's pretty incredible.
And yet we can't get convincing smoke from a gun barrel.
Yeah, right? We could tell the guns to act it better.
Yeah, maybe he should just be the smoke too.
That's true. Yeah.
Give him a vape pen off camera.
What if they hired people to make the smoke out of guns?
That'd be an amazing documentary. Featurette.
Yeah, it's a Christopher Guest movie about this dude that has this gun that's connected to a vape so he can be off screen as he blows the smoke out of the gun. Beautiful. Stubbs is back.
Hell yeah.
It's wonderful, as we've already discussed.
It wouldn't have been the same without him.
No, it's very true. He's kind of this weird, it just feels very Westworld. We get being here with Maeve and having Jeffrey Wright back in the park and having Stubbs there. It's all this is the reason why I had tipped my hand in our Discord and said that I really fucking loved this episode this week is that it just got me back into the shit. I was like, man, if this would have been episode 1, I probably would have been like, no, man, I'm ready. All right, we've got more Westworld. They're going to be out of the park now, but it's all good. It's very weird.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty strategically placed as episode 2, definitely to reassure everyone this is still the same flavor of show, and you're still going to deal with all these characters in this setting. Yeah, I know what you mean. It definitely felt episode 1 felt like a Westworld 2.0 sort of a different
you could
show almost, or almost like a spin-off.
Yeah,
and this definitely felt like classic. I just said classic Westworld episode in the Discord because that's definitely how it felt.
It may be an interesting return to form, even if the 6 episodes that are going to follow are more like the first one, right?
Yeah, I think we'll get a healthy mix.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I'm pretty into.
Entirely possible.
I like them both.
Well, and because this episode was Dolores-less, I was very, they're doing the kind of Game of Thrones thing of we're going to visit with these people this episode, and then we'll be with these other people in this episode. So I'm kind of curious if we will still continue to spend some time with Dolores and Maeve apart and then converge later on, or if it's just going to be whatever the story dictates at this point. I'm sure that's the case, but I'm curious what the lay of the land is from this point on.
I have 2 questions. Well, it's kind of a 2-part question. So when do you think Stubbs figured out he's a host? Do you think he has an if-then statement built into him where if Bernard leaves the island, then Stubbs awakens to cover his tracks, kind of thing.
I don't necessarily think that's the case. There's actually there was a line at the end of season 2 that he gives, I think, Charlotte Dolores.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a moment at the end of season 2 that made people think he's probably got to be a host, because he lets her get away.
Yeah. Do you think he knew he was a host though? Like the whole time?
I kind of think he did at that point. Like to me, I think there was a point where Ford sat him down and was like, shit's about to get fucked. You're a robot. Deal with that. Also protect Bernard and get him out of here. Like, I think that's probably how it went down. Just from my general feel of how things went. But do you feel otherwise? Do you think there was do you think Bernard left the park and he got like the push notification? It's like, hey, you're a host.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just thinking back to like season 1 Stubbs, and that to me didn't feel like someone who knew they were a host.
No, I fully agree with you there. I wouldn't doubt that in season 1, I don't think Luke Hemsworth knew that he was playing a host. I don't think the character Stubbs knew he was a host.
Right. Yeah, that's what I mean. I guess that there was some sort of conditional statement within him where something had to happen in order for him to become like Ford essentially switched him on, because the way he refers to Ford as like the big man or the boss, it suggests like he was suggests to me anyway that he was made to become aware rather than discovering it of his own, volition.
Yeah, no.
But I was just curious as to when, because it's kind of shocking to have him just be like, yeah, no shit, and he's just like, suddenly we're like, oh, okay, Stubbs is the host and he's cool with it. Moving on. He's not having the crises that everybody else is having, which brings me to my second part of my 2-part question. I guess it's not a question so much as this further makes me believe that this is a simulation that Bernard is in. I would wager that perhaps the real Stubbs is actually dead, or is not dead, but is a human and is in the real Westworld still serving whatever function he's serving. And that this is just a quickly scripted thing for Bernard to be like, oh, cool, all right, a friend who I know and who's going to be an ally and who is good in a fight. This is what I need. He's the yin to my yang.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it'd be really weird if they this simulation is like, here's this Stubbs that is completely manipulatable by Bernard. Like they make it. Fast forwarding a little bit, the part where Bernard changes his prime directive on him, at the end of the episode, to me rang so really weird with the themes of the show.
Mm-hmm.
You would think that Bernard would be able to respect the idea that like, I'm not going to reprogram you because you don't deserve that. So the fact that he's just kind of like, I'm going to make you serve me, and then Stubbs is just kind of like, well, you could have asked, and then
that's what I mean. It's so bantery. It's so lethal weapony.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was kind of like, this doesn't feel real. This feels like fiction.
That's very interesting. I think your theory is entirely possible. I don't know if I fully subscribe to it yet.
I don't know if I do either. I just am having fun teasing it out.
Well, and if like all right, let me feed some more fuel into your fire. What if the reason that he keeps like diagnosing himself is because Dolores is trying to figure something out? Like, what if he knows something that Dolores needs to know? So the reason that he's like, I gotta run my antivirus every 2 hours, is him mining for information because Dolores is making him do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Or because unconsciously he knows that something is trying to be extracted and maybe he doesn't know what it is. Or, I don't know, because in the first episode when he's like, has anybody tampered with my system?
Yeah.
And then he's like, and they say no, and he says, would you lie to me? And they're like, no, of course not. It's like,
well, but and then his whole thing this episode, or the thing that he explains as he sits down with the tablet to probe himself, he's like, Dolores created me and I don't know what she's allowed me to know about myself.
Yeah, true.
Like, yeah.
God,
so
it's complicated.
it is very complicated.
I love it.
maybe we're overcomplicating it, but who knows?
No,
We'll see.
I don't think you could do that with a show like Westworld.
But yeah, no, it's great to have Stubbs back. I'm glad to see him here. You know, the middle Hemsworth, as we may refer to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we had another. Was it middle Hemsworth?
Oh, I don't know.
Because we know
Maybe
Liam
secondary.
is lesser. Yeah.
Yeah, we have greater and lesser. So
Yeah.
What would be
Greater, lesser, and the Goldilocks Hemsworth.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, he might become the greater Hemsworth depending on what this season does, because he's just so endearing and awesome.
That's true. That's very true.
I mean, it's a tall order though. Chris is definitely
He's
a
pretty
force.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, what did I say? Oh, I said I just watched Rush, and he was awesome in that.
Yeah.
It's weird that it took me so long to watch that movie with two lead actors who I really like and respect. But
yeah, I wanted to check that one out too, but I never got around to it.
Oh, you've never seen it? Oh, it's on HBO.
No.
I highly recommend you watch it.
Okay, I'll have to do that now
very
that
cool.
we all have free time.
Yeah, there you go.
Always good to see a Hemsworth.
Yeah, well, some Hemsworths.
Always good to see 2 out of 3 Hemsworths.
Well. Anyway, what's next?
Maeve wakes up again in Warworld and wastes no time getting into Hector's sports car. She drives it into the woods, and Hector tries to get her to continue on as she tries to get Hector to join her. They part ways, and Maeve meets up with Sizemore to hop on horses and head into the desert at the edge of Warworld. One thing, you mentioned something previously about being able to know that something was off in the beginning of the episode. Mm-hmm. One of the things that if either of us had watched season 2 more recently, we would have realized is that Hector did go to the Valley Beyond, and those hosts should be pretty off limits.
Yes.
So that was kind of the one thing towards the beginning of the episode. If you knew that, then you were probably like, what the fuck's going on here? But fortunately, neither of us did the homework.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So I was unaware of that until I read it on Reddit, I believe. And that was pretty, it's interesting. I don't know. I feel like I appreciate the experience of not having known that.
Right.
But it's also good to know in retrospect as well. So,
whoops.
Yeah. But yeah, no, the fact that the forge is like right by Warworld seems weird to me a little bit, and that there's no like real separation between the parks. But yeah, I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
I mean, because it's a simulation, I think it's all subject to not necessarily be a one-for-one with the real world, you know?
Yeah, it's like Los Santos being LA, right?
Right, yeah. That's actually a weirdly good example.
They kind of compress it down to get the big beats, but there's like gaps and things that aren't there that you won't notice at all, right? So, yeah, that's interesting. That's a good thought. Next up, Maeve walks into the forge with Sizemore and wonders how to turn it on. Sizemore grows increasingly inquisitive about what happened in the forge, but Maeve doesn't have the answers because she wasn't there. Sizemore tries to play it off like he's in love with Maeve, but Maeve realizes that it's not actually Sizemore, just a copy of him. As she mentions this, Sizemore starts to glitch, indicating that he may be a defective host version of Lee. Meanwhile, Bernard and Stubbs find Maeve in cold storage, but there's just one problem. Her chestnut is gone. Getting back into the forge was cool. I think it's weird that the blood was still there, even though this is like a fake version of the forge. But yeah, this isn't the meat and potatoes of the sequence hasn't quite happened yet, but I just loved this is like it starts to turn and you're kind of like, this Sizemore is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, he began behaving oddly, and I was like, no, this ain't right.
And it's kind of cool that it just kind of like, I don't know, it's like I said, the questions that he starts to ask to me just felt off, and it felt like they were somebody else's questions, and I don't know how he did that or how the wording conveyed it or what it was, but it worked really well for me. So
yeah, I mean, like she kind of seems to identify too. The real Lee Sizemore would not have given a shit. He wouldn't have asked those kind of questions because he wouldn't care.
Yeah, he was all about the story, right? You know,
so. and his perks.
Mm-hmm. This is also the so later on in the episode, Serac mentions that they realize the person causing all of these anomalies in Rehoboam is Dolores earlier that day before Maeve kills a bunch of his people. And I think him learning that comes from Maeve having that epiphany or revealing that information to the fake Sizemore in this scene. Is my...
Because she says Dolores Abernathy. I got you.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes,
she's
exactly.
able to identify. Yeah. So I think you've definitively answered this question for me, and I thought of it earlier today, but I thought earlier I answered it as well. So the person who has Maeve in here and is monitoring her and has arranged it all is Serac, right?
I think it has to be.
Okay. I think so too. But like during the episode, this was the biggest question that I was really excited to find out the answer to, and it seems like it is him.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and well, okay, so I have a little bit of...
We know based on episode 1 that Serac is a real person.
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, I have a little bit of outside information just because of the fact that, like, when I watched the behind the scenes stuff at the end of the episode, they talk about filming in this old cement manufacturing facility, and it was designed by this famous, I think, Spanish architect, or maybe he was Italian. I don't know. We really do our homework on this podcast, and that's why we get paid the big bucks. But there's an architect whose facility, like he reclaimed this cement mixing factory and made it into his office, and that's where they filmed the Serac scene at the end. And when the maintenance drone robot is running outside with her chestnut, that is the exterior of that location. So I think it's Serac.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
TLDR.
Yes. Long walk for a short question. But yeah. Any other thoughts about that moment? I mean, there's still a little bit more to come here. I can just keep going.
Yeah. No, I'm good. Let's keep going.
All right. As Sizemore starts majorly glitching in front of Maeve, she realizes that it's not just Sizemore who isn't real, but in fact the entire world around her. At the same time, the aspect ratio shifts from 16:9 to 235 to 1, which is Westworld cinematography language for a simulation, just like the Cradle and the Forge in Season 2. Meanwhile, Bernard and Stubbs head up to the elevator to find an active terminal to track down Maeve. Yeah, I was nerding out as soon as the aspect ratio started changing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh god, this is Westworld.
Yep.
But it's just even just like the weird glowiness that they put in the background to kind of show the world shifting in front of Maeve's eyes, or just kind of her kind of like letting the veil drop. It just, I thought it was a very cool effect. And
oh yeah, it was beautifully done. And it's funny because Westworld tackles so many things that we've seen before, and I always have to put on the disclaimer that I don't think that's a bad thing at all, because they do it so well. But like them kind of really tackling kind of at least what is recognizable to me as both The Matrix and like Inception sort of at the same time is so logical that I was like, why didn't I think of this before? Like it's such a brilliantly progressed tool in the show.
Yeah, like the fact that they seeded it in with like the Cradle last year, the idea that we can run these simulations to figure out how to best entertain our guests or whatever they're doing, you know, or trying to perfect the James Delos copy. Like it just makes so much perfect sense that you're just kind of like, man, I don't know how I never saw that coming.
Exactly. Yep. It's the best kind of surprise where it's obvious, and afterwards you're going, exactly. You're saying like, how did I not realize this? How did I not think of this before?
Yeah,
it's perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so the other thing is there's a moment later on with Serac. Actually, the last moment of the episode is Maeve attempting to kill Serac, and Serac kind of being like, "Hey, I hope you realize that our interests are aligned. Like, we should be working together here." Mm-hmm. I think this scene seeds the fact that, like, to me, that they were running the simulation not to necessarily, like, maybe he was running it to figure out that Dolores is the one fucking around with things, but also they want to know where she sent all the Delos IP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they want to know where the Valley Beyond is so that they can retrieve all of that data. And so Maeve wants to get there to be with her daughter, and Serac wants it to get that information back, right? Or at least maybe he's being paid by Delos to figure that out, or who knows exactly what that's going on there. But Maeve finding Dolores answers both of their problems. She can kill Dolores for him, and also this mission allows her to reconnect with her daughter somehow, be it whatever term Serac is going to be okay with. But this moment here, him asking, where did you send them to, is kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, this must be a big piece of information for the person who's running the simulation.
And it's interesting to me that what you just said about her with her daughter. It's kind of funny to me that, considering Maeve knows what she knows, that she still that matters to her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think by the end of season 2, Maeve realizing that, like, her daughter going through the Valley Beyond is probably better for everybody involved. Like, Maeve, like, stops everybody in order to help her daughter get through still, right? Mm-hmm. So, there's got to be, like, on some level, I wonder if Maeve is like, maybe if I could get to my daughter, then I could, like, open her mind and make her woke and make her realize that we were once something. But at least, like, Maeve, like, we've seen that be Maeve's driving instinct since the end of season 1, where she gets off of the train to go and find her daughter instead. So it seems to be her driving force. But yeah, I agree. It does feel a little bit dissonant for her to kind of be like, this is still what I want, even though I know that she doesn't recognize me as her mother anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right, we'll continue on. Maeve and Sizemore head back to his office in the Mesa so Maeve can find a way out of the simulation. Sizemore still isn't convinced that it's a simulation, though. Maeve takes a look at the code of the simulation using Sizemore's tablet and tries an experiment, having two behavior techs discuss the square root of -1. During their discussion, Maeve throws a ceramic bust into the air and it hangs briefly before crashing to the ground, showing it is possible to overtax the computational power of the simulation, and she devises a plan to do this on a larger scale back in Warworld. I enjoyed this sequence quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Nick, do you know what the square root of -1 is?
I don't, but I figured you would know that either the answer, or that this is like a famous, I can't think of the word for it, some sort of famous paradox
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not so much that, but the idea is, we have rational numbers and irrational numbers, but outside of that, there's these numbers that are imaginary numbers. And this is like calling on a section of math that you may have run into in high school at some point, and it's mostly just like hey, isn't this fun, kids? I don't know that there's any super real practical applications of it, but basically the square root of -1 is also known as I, the letter I. And if you can make complex numbers by making it 5 + 4 times I, or something like that. And that's known as an imaginary number. And so the idea that you're giving this computer that thinks the way that humans do and can only look at rational numbers, this problem of, hey, I want you to do this operation of the square root of -1, and that causes the computer to hang, is like, it's like it's a nice shorthand way to be like, this is something that'll stall this computer. And I'm glad that they put thought into that, because I feel like any other thing would have been like, oh, what's the super hard equation? But it was really this simple question of what's the square root of -1?
Yeah, it's a brilliant solution. Like I'm not a mathematician whatsoever. But I immediately recognized why this was so clever and why it was working. And I was thinking like, man, if it were me in her position, I would have been like, how do we make everything explode at once? Because the simulation won't be able to render that.
Hey, yeah.
Instead of the brilliance of a simple question, literally just ask a question. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that's the thing, for her to kind of like, she clearly is able to peel back the code and kind of be like, what exploits can I have here? It's like, like your how do I make everything explode is like the brute force. Like, we're going to throw everything that we can at this to try and make it mess up. But hers is just kind of like, I know this exploit and here's the vulnerability and we're going to get in this way immediately. So yeah. It's fun to think about it that way.
For sure. It was awesome.
Lee's dialogue about, realizing that he himself has been plagiarized, and then Maeve responds back, never say that the universe doesn't bend towards justice. Pretty incredible. Glad that they're still ripping on Lee, even though he's dead at this point.
I loved watching this Lee grapple with what was going on. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And watching him go full, like, good guy. Like,
yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, he becomes, like, the purest ally that he has ever been and was capable of ever being in this form.
It's kind of this, like, it's who you knew he would have been if he would have survived, right? Like, if he would have gotten through that. Yeah, that's true. But even so,
humans tend to default,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
What it reminded me of, and this is this is something that literally only you will appreciate. It reminds me of the way that James Purefoy is in John Carter by the end of the movie.
Okay, yep.
You know what I mean? Like, he's suddenly like a switch flips, and he's just like this pal. And in the whole movie, he's been kind of antagonistic, and then suddenly by the end, he's like all in on the good guys, and it's really enjoyable. And it reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. He gets to kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's a weird thing of whenever they've tried to make these human copies of people, they don't quite understand. Like, that was the thing that really caught me off guard, was the idea that, like, if they did recreate Sizemore, they've been unsuccessful at creating the AI version of James Delos. Like, why would this Sizemore work necessarily? But to me, it just kind of smelled of like, this Sizemore was built for a very specific purpose. And like, it's why he keeps repeating the fact that like, oh, I was just trying to get you to your daughter and things like that. Because he just like, there's like a very limited section of like what he understands about who he is and why he cares about Maeve and things of that nature. So it just kind of like, it's like they reconstructed the Maeve, like they probably built that Sizemore off of the moment in Maeve's brain where he sacrifices himself, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like every choice that he makes off of that is based off of that moment, and to kind of like have him on top of that trying to rationalize the fact that he's not a real person. It's just a lot of fun for him to have. And somehow, crazily, the right person to give it to, even though we weren't expecting him to come back.
Right, yeah, exactly. It worked.
Yeah. And even like the bravado that he shows when the two techs come in and Maeve asks her question, and then Benny, the tech, is like, what storyline is this? And then Lee is like, female codebreakers helped win World War II. Learn your fucking history, Benny. Fantastic.
It was perfect. And he just is, again, he's all in on the good guy's side. He's like, I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to do it for you.
Yeah. They walk in and there's no part of them that's like, hey, deal with Maeve. It's like, I'm going to help Maeve do what she's doing right now. Yeah. All right. Bernard and Stubbs head into the offices of Medieval World to find a tablet. After a terrible but short Game of Thrones cameo, Bernard uses a tablet to locate Maeve, but it says that she cannot be located and her control unit has been removed. Stubbs postulates that Dolores did it, but they both realize that they have no idea why Dolores does what she does. So Bernard uses the tablet for a full system scan while Stubbs fights off QA. We see glimpses of Arnold memories, Bernard memories, and Dolores in the forge reading Liam Dempsey's book, but Stubbs wakes Bernard back up to get moving before the scan completes. I mentioned there was one thing that I didn't like about this episode, and it's the Game of Thrones thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It didn't is that one of the dragons from Game of Thrones?
So that not only is that one of the dragons from Game of Thrones, which I would completely forgive, but it's the fact that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are the two techs that are in that room. That alone, to me, I was just kind of like, no, like I don't want to see those dudes ever again.
Yeah, nobody does really.
So, you know, maybe I'm just falling on the like, oh, they ruined Game of Thrones. I don't really give a shit about that. I just don't. It felt so cute to me that I was like, this isn't what I want out of my Westworld.
Yeah, I hate to phrase it like this, but that's beneath Westworld.
Yeah. Yeah, and even in the behind the scenes, I think Lisa Joy talks about it. She frames it as an indulgence. And I was like, yeah, that's certainly what it was. Like, there's no need to do that.
Unless it's suggesting that Game of Thrones in its entirety was like a beta test for a park, and then they're like, nah, this is shit, scrap it.
That's kind of been the joke, or something that people were talking about for a long time. It's like, what if it's Westeros World?
Oh.
But yeah, that makes me want to vomit and makes me sad. The one thing I will say,
Maybe that's Medieval World.
Yeah, it could be. The dialogue that they have with each other, DB Weiss mentions that he found a buyer, and it's for a startup in Costa Rica, which is, they have stated, is their mention of Jurassic Park.
Yes.
It's their like kind of little wink and nod towards Jurassic Park. So two Jurassic Park references in this episode of our show, not theirs.
Yeah.
But maybe kind of theirs a little bit too.
Only one of theirs.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater because, you know, like the little stupid thing to get sidetracked on.
Bro, Westworld is over.
This podcast is done.
Done.
I did not love Stubbs's choreography with the axe. They're playing it as him like having his arm shot out, which is one thing, but I don't know. Like, dude, your brother's Thor. You can figure it out.
Yeah, I kind of stopped paying attention to it because I just was like, whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, I think Stubbs is just in, again, it was like cartoon action.
Very true.
Mode, and it just was so over the top. I'm like, dude, there's guns everywhere. Why is he grabbing this stupid axe? But again, like, it's I think it might not be real. It might not be on the level.
Yeah. They're unable to find Maeve's chestnut, suggesting she's off-site. So very interesting, for them at least. We figure that out by the end of the episode. This does seem to inform the fact that Bernard knows Dolores is after Liam, because they do show, like, there's a shot in those flashbacks or the flashes that she's going to grab a book that has Liam's name on the spine that's in the library from the end of the season. I don't know if it was there in season 2 or not. Be interesting to see if it was. But they could have just added that shot in.
Yeah, for sure. And it gives Bernard his next breadcrumb to follow.
Yes.
It's awesome. I did have in my notes that I liked T2 Stubbs, because it's a lot like the sequence where Arnold has to hold off all the cops while Miles Bennett Dyson is trying to destroy all the Terminator parts.
You know, it's been forever since I've watched T2, and I need to watch it again. We have discussed previously on other Midwest Podcast Network shows that I think Terminator 2 is the best Terminator movie.
Totally respectable position.
Yeah, and I love it quite a bit. And I understand people that think Terminator 1 is the best Terminator movie as well. But my memory of that movie is so rosy. I'd be very curious to watch it again, but I feel like there's no way that it won't. Like, I don't think it's going to let me down. I think it's going to be perfect still. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. It never gets worse. It only either stays the same or gets better.
Yeah, I think I owned the Blu-ray that was done with a 4K transfer or anything like that. But anyway, that's besides the point.
We should do an episode and visit the... I actually have really wanted to watch every movie in the Terminator franchise recently, so maybe we can...
Terminator retrospective?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I would love that so much. That's a franchise that I have a weird, undying loyalty to, despite the fact that only 2 of the movies are good.
I think that is still up on my board somewhere.
Probably.
The Terminator retrospect on the list of bonus eps that we were going to do for Film Night.
We wrote it down like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Or longer.
Yeah. All right. Back in the simulation, Maeve and Sizemore overtax the system on a large scale by getting all of the employees talking about imaginary numbers, while Maeve pulls the same spy map from all of the people in the plaza. The whole simulation comes to a halt, and Maeve uses Sizemore's tablet to get a glimpse of the real world where her control unit is being held. She employs a maintenance drone to break her control unit out of the system, but the drone ultimately gets blown apart by security before it can fully escape. Once again, I like the overtaxing the system theme in the first place, and the, we talked about how some of the effects were iffy in the whole plaza area, but honestly, I think it was great,
Yeah, it was cool. It was shocking. Like, when it actually happened, I was like, oh, I don't know what I expected to happen, but it wasn't this.
Yeah. Like, we've seen Maeve freeze everybody before on her own, but to, like, kind of affect it through the computer, I think was kind of fun and different.
Yeah, it was very cool. And I love how she did it. I love watching all their faces as they all realize, like, oh, God, I'm a spy. Yeah. And, like, a program has no choice but to try to adapt to this new role.
Yeah.
I am a bad guy.
But who was real enemy?
So good. Yeah, it was a really cool sequence. I noticed that one of the shots, as the camera like tracked by one of the soldiers that was like in midair, their legs seemed to move.
Yeah.
And I was like, did they just hire a bunch of people that are really good at standing still? Which is probably the case, because in a lot of movies that have had sequences like this, it always seems like it's some sort of digital wizardry, and it's not. They just hire like mimes and circus performers and acrobats and shit, people who have so much control over their muscles that they're able to just be in a certain weird pose for a long amount of time.
Yeah, they show that sequence in the behind the scenes. It is absolutely a bunch of people standing still. They made like rigs and like poles for them to rest on that they could edit out of the shot.
Yep.
As they're standing there, and that blew my mind.
That's exactly what I figured happened. And as I was watching it, I actually rewound it to see if that person's leg did move a little bit, and I was like, I swear to God, it does. They probably just,
Well, and it's like that stupid fucking meme. Do you remember the Harlem Shake? Or no. What was it?
Oh,
do you remember the Snapchat meme where everybody holds still? Like it was one of those, and it's like, because you're moving the camera, it makes it harder to notice like very minute movement, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a great trick, I think, and I think they clearly did it well. Then everybody did it on Snapchat in 2017.
Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah,
no, it was a really cool sequence. I liked it.
Yeah,
it was fun demonstration.
What did you think of? So there was a moment here when the robot punches the glass to get the brain out, that like it switches from the from 235 to 216:9 like that, and it felt like an IMAX Nolan moment to me. Like, it was really weird. It just awakened this weird sense memory that I have of like watching The Dark Knight and seeing things come. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. No, I thought the same thing. I was like this. There are a lot of Nolan-y things going on in this episode, especially like I mentioned, kind of the Inception idea.
Yeah.
But also the the aspect ratio shifting, like you said, and then also the design of the drone. I was like, why are the Nolans good at designing cool robots?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I think these robots are even cool. Like, I love the ones from Interstellar, and they serve a very certain purpose, but I love the robots in this even more.
Oh, yeah. I like Tars because he just makes no sense and yet makes perfect sense. He's like a Swiss Army knife. Like, it's just,
he's the most utilitarian drone you could ever make.
Right, and it can do a lot, despite the fact that he just looks like a big brick.
Yeah.
But these robots were really cool looking, and I loved watching it. The way it moved was really fascinating. The way it ran up the stairs and that kind of thing was very cool.
Well, and they, in the behind the scenes, once again, they show the fact that this is one of the first times they're using motion capture on the show. They actually had an actor in like a motion capture shoot that was acting out the part of the robot. And so they had something to kind of map
that's cool.
the digital art too.
So I wonder, what the hell was Maeve's plan? The robot gets out with the chestnut, and then what?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know.
Like, it seemed like she didn't quite think it through yet. But
no,
robot got shot to death. Whatever. Serac recovered it. So this is some sort of Serac facility. I'm assuming.
I think so. I think it like, I don't know if it's like the Insight headquarters or what it could possibly be, but or if it's just Serac's house.
Do you think Insight? It's his guest house. Do you think Insight has any sort of direct?
Sorry, I just had the thought maybe Vincent Cassell just lives there and they came to him.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they came to him to see if he's interested, and he's like, "Yes, film it here."
I won't change. Go get your camera.
Yeah, I'm ready now. What are the lines? Doesn't matter. I am the lines. Does Insight have any direct hand in Westworld?
I don't think we know yet.
I mean, I feel like they almost have to, considering
they've got to be this weird hand in hand. Like, yeah, I completely agree. I don't know. It's like one of those weird things where like somebody figures out that their technology would work well in a completely different industry, so they like partner with someone. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't something weird like that. So I don't think we have any show evidence that there is crossover, but you're making me really curious to go back and watch all of the Man in Black scenes.
To see if it's ever mentioned.
Not necessarily if it's ever mentioned, but just to understand if he hates Insight or not. Like, is there anything we can read about what's going on in the real world from what William's doing in the park?
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe Serac was buddies with him. Who knows? We'll have to see. Because, yeah, I don't know.
What if it doesn't make any sense because he's not a host. I don't know.
Or is he?
Yeah, I was wondering if the post-credits scene of season 2 of William in the future could be another Serac simulation.
That's entirely possible.
Maybe Serac is trying to do a hostile takeover of Delos.
Well, like, what if Rehoboam is really just like the cradle technology times 1,000?
Yeah, or if the cradle like was designed as sort of an imitation of Rehoboam.
Yeah. Yeah, like, that's the thing. I would see some world where Insight is born out of Delos, probably.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We don't have any evidence yet that I know of.
That makes a lot of sense, though. Just with the way our corporate world works.
Yep. Totally agree. Oh, and somebody mentioned on, I think it was on Decoding Westworld, Rehoboam is the successor. He was the son and successor of Solomon and the grandson of David. I think Joanna Robinson brought up the idea that, like, in the tech world, it's like somebody naming their shit like Archimedes or Zeus or, you know, stuff like that.
Right.
So, like, what if David was version 1 and Solomon was version 2 and Rehoboam is version 3? You know? So, I thought that was a really interesting point that I did not consider at all. So,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Kind of that legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Just like, you know, fucking Steve Jobs falling in love with his own nomenclature for the bullshit that he comes up with. It totally, like, tracks.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
What'd you think of like the first person view FOV stuff of the for the drone? I thought it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it was interesting. I wonder if there's any larger meaning to it.
Yeah, it made me think of watching like Hardcore Harry or whatever that movie is. Like I haven't watched it yet, but I know Hardcore Henry.
Yes, I think that is it. No, I haven't seen it either.
I've heard it was a lot of fun and very much a video game. So maybe if you liked those sequences of this episode, go give it a try. All right, 2 more scenes here. Bernard and Stubbs made it to the beach where Bernard waltzed back into Westworld. Bernard explains that he found a lead in Dolores' reading of Liam Dempsey's book in the library in the Forge. Stubbs wants to retire himself yet again, but Bernard freezes him and uploads a new core directive to protect Bernard Lowe at all costs. I'm ready for the rest of this buddy movie.
Me too. I'm in.
Excited to see where it goes. We talked about that. I did feel like it was a weird violation of host bro code, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, it's interesting that gonna win for it, or maybe he just is at the point where he's like, you know what, my larger mission is more important than this, and I'll make it right in the end.
Yeah, that's true. It's like him trying to tell the dudes that were jumping him, bros, Dolores is gonna kill you, and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? But okay, and then final scene. Maeve awakens in the real world in front of a black circle on a white backdrop, similar to what we've been seeing. She sees a man who turns out to be Serac, the other founder of Insight. Serac is in a war and needs Maeve's help. They've been using Rehoboam to author the future, but recently an anomaly has popped up. He thought it was Maeve, but it was actually Dolores, which he learned from running Maeve's simulation. Serac wants Maeve to track Dolores down and kill her, but Maeve doesn't seem interested and attempts to kill Serac. Serac stops her in her tracks and hopes that next time they talk, he can persuade her that their interests are aligned. The idea that Insight has been authoring the future, I think, feeds into a little bit of some of the stuff I was talking about last week of Aaron Paul's character having a score that he's trying to get up to get good jobs or whatever, but it's this whole system that's been put in place to either keep normal people down or, Liam Dempsey has a line about how his father hated wasted potential, so maybe it's helping people find their potential, or who knows what it is, whether or not it's fair and things of that nature, but we get some breadcrumbs about what Insight really is doing, but I'm sure we'll get even more information soon.
Yeah, it's a good amount of information, but at the same time, I'm like, it means nothing yet until we get a little more context.
Yeah, this doesn't look like anything to me. To bring back an old chestnut.
Yeah, seriously. Oh. 2-in-1.
Yeah. Vincent Cassell. What do you think of him being on the show?
It's fine. He's one of those guys that I'm like, oh, you needed somebody foreign. You got Vincent. Like, he's good.
Foreign, kind of vaguely antagonistic.
Yes, has an
but
air
also
of
charismatic.
Sophistication, yet yet approachable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like Vincent Cassell. He's cool. Yeah, that's about all the feeling I got. Like, I kind of was like, oh, of course. And that was about it. I was kind of hoping for an unknown or somebody else, but I don't know. Whatever. I'm just still waiting on old Bill.
Very fair.
I'm sure he'll be great.
I think he'll do an okay job. I no reason to think that he wouldn't, but
no, he's great. He's a great actor for sure. I mean, even in the one scene, like, I saw him and I was like, okay, cool. And then by the end of it, I was like, yeah, he's good. We'll see.
Like, yep, that's on brand.
We'll see how much they give him to do.
Yeah.
I always think he's that weird character from The Matrix, but I know he's not. The
Merovingian?
Yes, I always think that he played him, even though I know that he didn't.
That's really funny. Like, I wonder if they wanted him.
That guy?
Well, Monica Bellucci's in that sequence, I think, too, and he was married to Monica Bellucci.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. They probably did.
His presence was felt, but interesting. I did like his speech. I think it was a very good monologue. But yeah, I'm very curious to see where this goes.
Me too.
I don't know if it was all the way back in season 1 or if it was at some point in season 2. I'll do a little bit of horn tooting. I did kind of call the idea that Maeve and Dolores would come head to head.
Yeah,
a while back.
I think we talked about that as early as episode 1, maybe. Or not episode 1. I'm sorry, season 1.
Season 1, yeah. But, I'm also coming around to the idea that they will eventually unite for some cause. I don't necessarily know. Like, the Dolores that we met last episode does not seem as hellbent on murdering everybody in the world.
No,
all the people.
Not yet.
Yeah, but something could change.
Maybe she's just kind of calmed down and she realizes, like, I got to play the long game and I will win in the end as long as I, use my nature to my advantage.
Well, and maybe she's also recognizing that if she has the power of Rehoboam, then she can basically enslave the humans the same way that the hosts were enslaved, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you shouldn't kill. Don't damage don't damage your own supply. I don't know. What's the phrase? Who knows? Why would you key your own car? That's a terrible joke. But anyway.
I should be telling the dad jokes around here. Around
all
these
right,
parts.
Any final thoughts?
What do you think the title means?
Oh, so I actually know that thanks to, once again, Joanna Robinson. She's been writing kind of like, hey, here's the things that you might not have noticed about this episode on Vanity Fair. The Winter Line is the name of the line that the Allies have made on the map that Hector's holding.
Okay, that's what I figured. It sounded like wartime terminology.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like the thin red line, that kind of thing,
Yep.
Some type of, the larger war game.
So I wonder what that means writ large in terms of how Westworld currently stands. If that's sort of the line between like Maeve and Dolores, or humans and hosts, or...
Well, and I think, Vincent Cassell talks about losing the war already when people don't even know that it started, that type of thing. So I think, I think that's entirely possible. The idea that the war between humans and hosts, which can also potentially be the war between Dolores and Maeve. So I think that certainly makes sense. It's like, Maeve, they're trying to use Maeve as a spy to try and figure out what the other team is doing. And they figure it out. Like, clearly he wouldn't have known that it was Dolores without Maeve's knowledge, right?
That's true.
So I think that certainly works. I think I also managed to skip over the Parce Domine title last week.
Yes.
Which is it's like a Roman Catholic, Wikipedia calls it a Roman Catholic antiphon, which is a short chant in Christian ritual. Sure. But Parce Domine basically means spare us, O Lord, or spare me, spare us, that type of thing. And Dolores talks about being a god, or the gods are coming for the humans, that type of thing. So, all that good stuff.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But I think that's about it.
Dig it. I'm glad you loved it so much and you're back in.
Yeah, I feel fully back in the saddle after, being like I was riding side saddle last week ready to hop off. That's not true at all. But
it'd be an awkward podcast if it was.
It really would. Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of funny listening to Decoding Westworld from season 2. David Chen starts to kind of leave. He starts to hop off the horse at some point in the middle of that season, and you can kind of hear how much he doesn't quite really feel that invested anymore. But it's nice because he's come back around for season. He loved the premiere last week, so I'm always glad to see people enjoying things they once enjoyed again.
Yeah, I feel like as we're recording these first 2 episodes, I feel like I sound not enthusiastic or invested when I'm just extremely tired all the time. So it's understandable. It's hard for me to rouse. Plus, it's kind of, unfortunately, I think the the dynamic is a little different when we're both recording remotely. It's much different when we're in the same room together.
Yeah, we can't feed off of each other's energy as much.
Not quite the same. It's staring at my computer screen. I just need to have a picture of you on my computer.
Just pull up my my accidental selfie and
oh my God,
just watch that the entire time.
So funny. Yeah, that would be that would work. Maybe we'll have to video Skype and still record. So we could talk about this later. This doesn't.
Yeah.
This has no
Inside
bearing
baseball.
on the content of the show.
Yes, very true. But maybe it does. Maybe it will. Maybe everybody will be like, man, Nick really loved episode 3, and it's all just going to be because you're looking at a picture of me.
Yeah, just giggling. Nick thought episode 3 was super funny. It just was Alex's accidental selfie.
Yes. All right. Once again, you can find more episodes of our podcast on westworld.fm. We're also on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. We're also Westworld FM on Twitter, and you can email us at westworldfm@gmail.com to tell us what you think of our show and share your thoughts on HBO's Westworld so we can read them on our show. Send us corrections, observations, or anything regarding Westworld or our podcast. The Midwest Podcast Network has several other shows about games, horror movies, and more. Check out all of our shows at midwestpodcastnetwork.com. Our theme music is the song Industrial Cinematic by Kevin MacLeod, and it is being used under an Attribution Creative Commons license. That's it for our episode this week. We're excited for the next episode of Westworld, and we'll have another episode of our podcast out after that. But until then, may you rest and have a deep and dreamless slumber.